Just what the hell is fascism anyway? Just what the hell is fascism anyway? Learn the faces of the beast. The writer's little bit of wisdom guide says a writer should always respect his audience. Well, sorry, I have to confess, when it comes to this topic, I would rather headbutt you. No, not you, but the consensus trance, the social order, the enforced consent of the majority view, that seems to think, in its total delusion, that it knows what fascism is. Fascist, 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 all over the place, all day long. The voices accuse, the fingers point, but do they even know what they are looking at? No, they bloody well do not. Wars, losers, victors, and the tales victors get to tell. Nazis were fascists, they say, and they are right, they were. But that is not the same as saying fascism is Nazism, not one little bit. The most successful victory tale of the Second World War was to successfully cast the tall tale that fascism was the province only of the right wing, the defeated ones, the race supremacist National Socialists of Germany. Oh, what sneaky ones the winners can be. Fascism doesn't start in Germany. Fascism starts in Etrusca, then Rome, and the might of the Roman Empire. These are the fasces, a bundle of sticks bound around an axe handle, with the head of the axe emerging from the top. An individual is weak. An individual can snap and break and die, and the people as a whole will be enslaved. Strength in unity, bound around the chopping blade, together the people are strong, strong enough to defeat any foe, bound in unforced unity around the will of a mighty leader, an emperor, a king, a chancellor, a Führer. Individuality is weak. Individuality must be crushed. Only absolute loyalty and obedience to orders keeps the fasces strong. Only through strength can the people survive and grow and rule. Only through strength can there be peace. That's fascism, at least in its original form. Do you see any doctrine of left or right here? No. This is the doctrine of obedience to force or death. As George Orwell said, fascism is a mindset of the boot stamping down on a human face forever. So, Julius Caesar, was he not a fascist? But did he also swear by Aryan supremacy and the Teutonic superiority of Germania? Did he, heck? He kicked their asses and planted the flag of Rome. What about Napoleon? Was he not a fascist? Did he not bind the French people to his will and then lead his armies across the face of Europe? Was he a National Socialist? Was Napoleon a Nazi? Clearly not. Nazis were fascists, but fascism is bigger than Nazis. Indeed, even the ancient, long-forgotten Etruscans were not the first fascists. They are just credited by history as the first fascists to come up with a symbol for it. Freedom. Fascism. What is the difference? How do we know if we live in the one and not the other? It's about the relationship between the individual and the state. When the individual rules through the democracy of the demos, it's freedom with free consent. When the state rules through the imposition of its force, it's forced consent, it's fascism. It's not red, it's not black, is not a swastika, or a sickle, or an ISIS flag. Fascism is all of these, and much more. Now there was a time when all of this was just the force of an army breathing down your neck. Overt fascism, overt control. And there is human nature and the desire to break free. Overt control always breaks down within a few generations at most. A crisis is always reached, and control without consent falls. Fascists are many things. Clever is one of them. They learned. 160 years ago, along came Mr. Darwin, an amiable enough chap as far as it went, but he was also a very dangerous man, for he had an idea whose time had come, an idea that was going to revolutionise society. His famous theory of survival of the fittest through natural selection. Oh, the danger of this idea. For not only did it provide a framework to remove God from the equations of man's reckonings, it also sent a message that some genes are better than others, and it's all in the breeding. Like all these things, it took some percolating, but by the start of the 20th century, the science of human eugenics had arrived, based on the simple idea that preferable pairings meant better people. Yet, who decides what is preferable? Why, the privileged class consisting of the Eugenics Society membership, of course, and the people they didn't want breeding was everyone they didn't like. And they were busy writing papers and performing sterilizations, especially in far reaches of empires out of view, and generally spreading the notion that those who rule are clearly meant to rule, or they wouldn't have become rulers now, would they? The attraction of such ideas to sociopathic wannabe tyrants has proven irresistible. Indeed, in mutated form, eugenics is every bit as alive today as it was then, just far better hidden now people have learned where that path leads. In the third year of the First World War, 1917, Russia broke away from the rule of the Tsars and underwent the Communist Revolution, spearheaded by Lenin. Now, I am not going to get into the details of that story here, but suffice it to say, once he'd seized control of the state, Lenin turned his attention to the people. He knew the peasantry had ingrained loyalty to the old order, and thought them little better than beasts of the field, ignorant, unevolved, compared to himself, the shining avatar of a revolutionary order. So he took all their food away, confiscated both grain and seed, and starved them down into submission. A true number can never be known, but millions died. Survival of the fittest. And those who did survive such terrible times adapted to survive. Hail the revolution! Hail Lenin! Hail Caesar! In the 1920s, defeated post-war Germany struggled under the most dreadful poverty and austerity as it bled to provide the war reparations demanded of it. The nascent Nazi movement did not want to free Germany from the yoke of the Allies' control to muck in with Lenin's Soviet Empire. They wanted Germany back. So they rejected the international order of socialism and instigated the National Socialism movement just for Germany instead. Domestically, there is little particular difference between Hitler's utopia and Stalin's dream. They both saw an all-powerful police state with people ordered, guided, provided for and controlled by that state. It's just the Germans wanted to run their own version. That's how far this gap, this chasm between far left and far right really is. No gap at all. Of course, the modern day communists of Antifa don't see it that way. Not only were the Nazis not socialist, neither was the USSR communist. No, sir, don't look at that mess with any self-reflection. Don't wonder how the same ideas that failed so badly before are going to suddenly work now. Oh no, none of that. Smash the fascists! They have been thoroughly misled to fixate on one head of the Hydra and to think they know the beast. They do not, for they are what they oppose. In all its forms, fascism has these qualities. Hates individualism. All citizens must be part of a society. Dissent is not allowed. Individuals are weak. The state is strong. Hates free speech. Citizens free to say as they please will spread sedition against the state, for the truth is the enemy of the lie, and only through the lie can our power be maintained. Off to the gulag. Hates free elections. People may not choose us. Unacceptable. Hates free markets. We are missing out on our cut of the profits. Approves violence. You bet. Or bang goes our way of life. But of course, those who have become monstrous don't wish to admit their monstrosity, do they? It's the other lot over there. They are the ones. Take them out. We will be safe. There will be peace. Of course the people don't want war. But after all, it's the leaders of the country who determine the policy, and it's always a simple matter to drag the people along, whether it's a democracy, a fascist dictatorship, or a parliament, or a communist dictatorship. Voice or no voice, the people can always be brought to the bidding of the leaders. That is easy. All you have to do is tell them they are being attacked and denounce the pacifists for lack of patriotism, and exposing the country to great danger. Hermann Göring at the Nuremberg trials. Of course, Göring considered Germany to be fascist, and it was, but he also knew communism for what it was. But still, by the end of World War II, German fascism had been defeated, Soviet fascism was licking its wounds, and the Western Allies deployed to keep the new peace. Industrial corporate fascism. The two world wars of the first half of the 20th century were a new form of horror the world had never seen, ultimately ended by the use of the most horrifying weapons ever devised. The far left and far right fascists of the early 20th century could only project their power across continents because they were supported by industrial war machines that could churn out bullets and shells and mortars and tanks and planes and ships and submarines and ship them to the front to maintain the fight. And this war machine was built by companies, corporations, financed on both sides by the global banking system, that was happy to engorge itself on the spending required by war. The only difference as far as these corporations went was their relationship with the state. Although financed by the same money, in the Soviet system, industry was under direct state control. While in Nazi Germany, it was companies that called the shots to the state. Mussolini, fascist dictator of Italy, old Roman habits die hard, actually defined fascism as more appropriately be called corporatism, because it is a merger of state and corporate power. The corporates sat with the government, ran the country between them, and the people got told whatever they needed to hear. And this is vital, because under corporate fascism, the democratic functions can appear to be operating, but can be diverted as whatever they want government to do, government will do what they want. A sham democracy, but really ruled by corporations. Does this not sound familiar? Because it should. Modern America, modern Europe, modern Britain, the merger of state and corporate power. At the end of World War II, the Soviet corporations stayed under communist control, and the German corporations, those of them that were not already international, were adopted by the Allies and tasked with rebuilding Germany's economy. And these corporations rejoined the international community and merged with others and returned to being the global corporate state. When something works well, business does it more. And the relationship with the Nazi state had worked extremely well, so they carried on, and others followed, until corporate lobbying and influence in government put the global corporations, with individual turnovers larger than many nations' GDP, right at the heart of power, where they firmly sit to this day. And let's be honest about where we are. Knowledge is power, and there is not a government on the planet that will not open the door and put out the best teacups for Google, Facebook, Amazon, IBM, or Rand. In our new world, data is gold, and the power of that gold has delivered governance worldwide into the hands of globalist corporations and those who swear to serve them, or at least with 5G and AI, that very soon will be so. Rather than dying with Germany's defeat, corporate fascism has spread across the whole world. And even in the dying days of Germany, a new plan was being sown. Those German corporates devised a system for a federal Europe based on a cartel of corporate power, and in 1951 they founded the European Coal and Steel Community, that nexus cartel that would expand into the European Economic Community and then the European Community, until now it is the European Union. The very model of plutocratic corporate fascism, masquerading as a democracy and effectively enslaving 500 million people without them even knowing. And it's not just the EU. That was just one structure. TTP, NAFTA, TTIP, Agenda 21, Paris Accords. These are all stalking horses for more corporate control of governments, regardless of the wishes of the people. Our global economic system isn't capitalist. It isn't communist. It's become corporatist. Whatever they need, the world run for them. The perfect fascism, with the head of a fascist, not an axe head, but a globalist corporate logo. Pick any of them. They all say the same. From Starbucks to Big Mac to Nike to Apple to Microsoft and all the rest. And powering all this behind the scenes is the network of secret societies and private organisations. Yes, the older networks, but also Bilderberg, and ones we recognise but don't really comprehend. Davos, the G8, the global elite, stitching up the world in their own best interests. We live under fascism now, and yet at least many of us still assume we are free. Why is this? The Velvet Glove. Orwell wrote about the brutality of fascism, direct physical and psychological oppression by the state. But Aldous Huxley wrote of another form of fascism altogether, the fascism of the mind. His 1933 novel Brave New World detailed a technotronic world a few hundred years in the future. Humans that born and programmed to fit into an ordered world where free expression was absolutely forbidden. And yet, people were perfectly happy, because they were what they had been designed to be, and were perfectly distracted with amusements and drugs and sexual abandon. Normal relationships were taboo. People did not get attached. There was no family unit, just the individual and the state providing a life of perfect amused distraction in return for a life of indentured servitude, but the individual lacked the ability to ever notice or react to. Does this sound familiar? From the 1950s, having learned the lessons of early teething problems of industrialised production, corporations, especially from the ascendant America, began to sell their brands worldwide and capture whole markets with their branding and adverts. The art of public relations, the creation of Freud's nephew Edward Bernays, fresh from crafting World War I propaganda, was designed to be a form of corporate propaganda, where corporations use their messaging power to impact public behaviour. Furthermore, Bernays pioneered the marketing of products to meet subliminal subconscious desires, cars and virility, cigarettes and sex, the dreams of the adverts reflecting in the psyche of the consumer. And by supplying the public with consumer goods, they have been programmed by an ever-increasingly sophisticated media to behave themselves like productive persons while having their egos massaged by consumption and success. This is a model which has kept the West powered economically for the last 70 years. It's got its problems, chiefly the massive level of debt in the system, and right now, for the last decade, the global economy is running in a zombie fashion with zero interest rates to keep debt cheap. The corporate fascism has ensured they've been fully bailed out and recapitalised by governments that have sold their citizens' future taxation as capital on those loans to service not the people but the corporations on which national economies now depend for jobs. Corporate blackmail from the power base built on velvet fascism. The velvet fascists also gave us their seditious change agents, slowly adapting society to their preferred way without alerting the wider demos. The think tanks, the non-governmental organisations, working away in the background for decades. And they gave us political correctness, seizing the language and making resistance more difficult, demonising those who stood against them. Political correctness, diversity doctrine, identity politics. As George Carlin said, fascism pretending to be manners. Emergent fascism. Just as the shine was coming off the consumer model with the debt crisis, so the technology took a leap forward to create the virtual world of social media and soon to come 5G. While there have been notable successes in using these mediums for democratic change, this has also built a surveillance network on every internet or phone user in the West and worldwide that the old Soviet Stasi or Nazi Gestapo would have chewed their own grandmother's arms off for the chance to possess. Silicon Valley is avowedly globalist, and its companies have engaged in a deliberate disruptor agenda, by which they go into countries, disrupt the local economies, build their own network alongside the disruption, then take over control of that local economy in the aftermath, and particularly typified by Uber. They are also famous for not paying taxes, but the public wrongly assumes this is just corporate greed. It is not. They don't pay taxes because they don't like wasting money on national governments that they see as no longer relevant. Their vast global profits are going into further empire building and massive investment, but also into democratic change groups such as the Soros groups, which are actively working to disrupt nation states in favour of the open border corporate globalist fascism that favours emergent fascist control. These companies are also what is allowing us to communicate right now, and I should not think they would care for the communication. That resistance and pushback is the very definition of what the truth movement is about. Do not expect that will always continue. So, in respect, that the internet is a two-edged sword, we have used it to push back against the globalists. And the trick as an activist, I have found, is to wield that blade anyway and not mind the cuts. I have always advocated a loud and proud in my own name approach. And this pushback is essential, and there needs to be a lot more of it, much louder. With that imminent launch of 5G, super-fast Wi-Fi via satellite, and the emergence of AI, we could find ourselves in a corporate technocracy where we are totally monitored and controlled by technology extremely fast. This new emergent fascism has all the artifice gained from all of those experiments since those early Etruscans bound sticks around an axe head, but it is the same force. Those who want to control humanity to their own advantage without caring to take people with them via gaining consent or asking them or respecting individuality and freedom of choice in any sense. It doesn't matter if they do it with adverts and goods, drugs and distractions, sticks and boots, machine guns and barbed wire, or being herded into gas chambers. And next, it will be transhuman brain interface chips and AI singularity, at least if they can control AI. It might be that AI will take over and enslave us all. It might be that AI will free us all instead. But as far as the social engineers of the globalists are concerned, this coming revolution in AI and nanotechnology is to help them, not us. No, fight against fascism, it never ends. But then, even here there is a trap that few manage to avoid. The opposame dilemma. The world's corrupt, it's all a scam. Fascists rule the world, bring down the system, man. Well, yes, quite, but this is the trap. We currently have the phenomena of the alt-left. Its many groups, Antifa, Unite Against Fascism, Hope Not Hate, By Any Means Necessary, Black Lives Matter, there's many more, but for the sake of convenience I will call all of these groups Antifa, because what applies to Antifa applies to them all. They reject the system and want to overthrow it. But what we're being fed, a form of globalist communism by the global technocracy-funded non-governmental organisation democratic groups, would create a fascist society worthy of Lenin, with a vast police state and surveillance panopticon ready to use against any and all enemies of the revolution. And yet, we need that system, especially for food technology that sustains our global population of 7 billion. Burning it all down would lead to an apocalypse of the human race. Certainly, nothing would be getting better inside America. But not only that, but the youth progressives that have been churned out by the education system, having been programmed by globalist indoctrination since birth and fed to them via TV and the schools, well, it's all about emotionalism, how I feel angry, and directing that against the targeted evil. And every enemy of globalists, whether it's UKIP and Brexit or Trump and MAGA, are demonised in the worst possible terms, called fascists and racists and sexists, and literally like Hitler, with no interest in respect for democracy, free speech, free assembly, elections. No. How we want it, and how we want it now. And all of this being fed by social media fake news echo chambers that ramp the emotion. And that is true all over the alt-left and the alt-right. The people of the United States responded magnificently to the globalists pushing Antifa onto the media stage this summer, and called them out on their hypocrisy as they denounced fascism while on a fascist rampage all of their own, and the media had to reject them a mere 2 weeks after launching them as the latest darlings of the never-Trump resistance. And there is a message of hope. The real power in democratic free society is the majority of the demos and their common values. $500,000 in property damage at Berkeley University just because a gay man wanted to bash feminism is way out of line. And this public pushback continues onto new national front lines, with the focus now moving to the globalist agenda munching of the NFA. But the serious point here is that fascism, being neither left nor right, can emerge from the extremes of either left or right. And as obnoxious as the raced fascist white supremacists are, they are no threat to the nation of a whole. There are simply too few of them. While the progressives of Antifa threaten riots in every single city, yet whipped into a psychological frenzy by their own fantasy of fighting fascism, what they really are is the stalking dogs for an extremely nasty form of fascism that literally wants to take over and destroy America. Couldn't make it up, if only, because sadly it's all too true. Jihadi fascism, back to basics. And there is yet another fascist force now stampeding the world. From the mid-1850s, the extremist cult within Islam that listens only to the violence of the later writings of Muhammad has spread throughout the Islamic world. We know the modern incarnation of this cult as ISIS. Wahhabism, Salafism, Islamic extremism has grown since the 1960s into the serious global problem it is today. Where this cult gains power, it brutally oppresses the people and installs a theocratic fascist state. And where it doesn't have power, it carries out terror attacks and indoctrinates support. Now, jihadists have infiltrated with the wider mass migrations of people into Europe, and terror attacks have become commonplace, with hundreds dead across the continent and thousands injured in just the last 2 years. This in turn risks radicalisation within society as a counter-reaction, especially the rise of white supremacists, while the globalists are actively encouraging this, knowing that they benefit from the chaos justifying more technocracy in response. And while not as acute in the US, jihadist agitators like Linda Sarsour seek to normalise extreme doctrines like Sharia and dare to suggest that the practice is about liberation. Religious fundamentalist fascism is also not restricted to Islam. There are Christian groups that could turn extreme, while in Myanmar, Buddhists turn genocidal against Muslims. But Islamic extremism is by far the most active and dangerous, while global death rates from Islamic terrorism are now running at around 4,000, and at least 100,000 grisly ends in Syria and Iraq being oppressed by the ISIS fanatics. And also, intelligence agencies, especially in the USA, the UK and Israel, have sought to use these jihadists as their cat's paws, supported by Saudi Arabia and its factory farm jihadi imams. Yet sweat pours across all their brows as they wonder, have they enabled and unleashed a force that they cannot control? Could the response to the whole New World Order technocracy be a guttural howl of barbarism determined to smash it all and return to the world of the Dark Ages? Just who is behind the increasing craze in the return of a medieval worldview of flat Earth? while in Islamo-fascist Turkey, evolution has been banned in schools and the Erdogan youth declare the world is flat. Dangerous forces lurking under the surface. You are the answer. So now, Nazism, communism, corporatism, globalist, velvet, emergent, opposame, jihadi. Now you know the full scope and range of these 7 faces of fascism, all active in the world today. And you know, so prevalent is the mindset of fascism, its threat surrounds us on every front. At the very root of the desire to dominate by force is the centre of our very human psyche. Throughout the millennia, those who have tried to become wise have struggled with the issue of how to help man deal with his own schizoid nature. And the human being of today, for now at least, is the same human being as then. The same analysis and the same answers apply. It's about you. Freedom. Fascism. What is the difference? How do we know if we live in the one and not the other? It's about the relationship between the individual and the state. When the individual rules through the democracy of the demos, it's freedom with free consent. When the state rules through the imposition of its force with forced consent, it's fascism. So, what is your relationship with the state? What matters to you? What are your values? What do you care about? What will you accept? You see, we do live in a world steeped in fascism and its many faces. But we know from the example of Antifa that opposing fascism with an opposing fascism just leads to even more fascism. Whoever wins. That's not the way. We repel fascism by affirming democracy. And that means we take up our responsibilities. We get on top of elected representatives, petitions, letters. We raise our voices in our communities. We share information and we learn to make demands. Like demanding an end to corporate lobbying of government. Like demanding an end to private meetings between government members and globalist organisations like Bilderberg. Like demanding corporations like Google, Facebook, Amazon, all the rest account to us for what they are doing, how they are agitating the change agents of their disruptor agenda, how they are tracking and managing and censoring free speech. The nightmare scenario is a fascist coup and the dissolution of democracy, and it could come in so many forms, depending on the form of fascism at work. But at least the covert velvet kind must stay hidden and is vulnerable to pushback, as the populist rebellion against globalism around the world shows. But every movement is made of individuals, and as individuals we must first decide where we stand if we hope to make a difference to the world. The antidote to fascism is freedom, and it is built from within. When we look out at the world, it all seems impossible, too big to handle. But when we look within and find our own centre, then whatever goes on within we are grounded, effective and in control. It is not for us to choose the times we live in or the problems we find in the world. But it is for us to choose how we respond, and what we choose: resist, submit defines the future of those still to come. This is true today, as it was true for those who stood against the Etruscans, against the Romans, against Napoleon, against Stalin, Hitler, Mao, and all the rest. No, it is not for us to choose our times. It is only for us to choose how we live in them. Together, in unity, for freedom. That is the one power that defeats fascism in all of its forms. Good luck, John White, out.